Patrick, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am so thrilled to be chatting with you again. The last time we got to talk was for Expendables 3.
Oh, my Lord. That was a few years ago.
It's been a few years ago. And I have to say, it's been well worth the wait to get to talk to you about The Man from Toronto.
Oh, brilliant.
I had so much fun watching this movie, Patrick.
Right.
All of your movies, I always have fun watching. But you have, we saw this with Hitman's Bodyguard, Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. You have this great ability to meld comedy with action. And then you bring in stunt coordinators like Dan and Phil that actually work comedy into the action sequences.
Totally.
And this is a rare gift. You're one of the few that can do that. Either there's comedic moments and action moments, or dramatic moments and action moments, but there's never a blend. And you have so perfectly brought that together here with and casting the disparate personalities, total opposites of Kevin and Woody. That you've got Woody standing there, deadpan, stoic, unflinching. Kevin, his usual frenetic self. And you laugh your ass off. It's great.
Well, mission accomplished. Thank you very much.
How do you get a script like this? And I know that this was inspired by Jason Blumenthal and a real case of mistaken identity. But the script plays on everything that then lets you have visual fun with no ink in the printer. You haven't replaced the toner cartridge and you can't read the paper. And how many of us are guilty of doing that? I'm not going to admit to. But you get these visual sight gags that work within the story. And you just make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And at the same time, you have the characters of the man and Teddy at polar opposites. But by the time we get to the third act, we see the freneticism is leaving Kevin's character of Teddy. And Woody's character of the man is lightening up until we see them almost in a perfect sync balance. And it is so fascinating watching this emotionality play out. Where do you even start with a film like this?
Well, I think, it's certainly, there is a lot of it. For me, personally, I'm a big fan of this genre. But I think when you take away all the action and all the gags and the comedy, it really needs to have a heart and soul. Mm-hmm. And I think when I'm developing the script, that's the thing I'm constantly focusing on more so than anything else. And then once we've got that arc in there, and that's clear to me what those turning points, those key moments are, then we go through, and I think the action is something that we really do you build the action like you would a sculpture, and you sort of hack away at it, and then you're chipping away, and then you're polishing it, and you're fining it. And then in terms of like working that comedy into these action sequences, it's always like, well, how can I subvert this moment? Because to me, it's the imperfections, and I think that's why I'm drawn to this genre, because it does reflect more so real life, There's not a precision to real life. Doesn't go exactly as planned with precision, and everything's super cool, and people escape explosions 24/7. Whereas this is all about, well, how do I just stay alive in this situation? And then, you can have those cool moments, and if we're going to have a really cool moment, I'm going to subvert it for sure. And I think that's where the fun and games are, and certainly for the audiences, I know that they get a kick out of it too.
Well, and something else that you do, and I've seen this in your prior films, you build your action set pieces so that each one gets bigger than the one
Yeah.
before it. And the same thing here with the man-on-man fight choreography. You've got a lot of in-camera fight choreography happening here. I think probably
Yeah.
I didn't see this much in either Hitman movie, but I definitely saw it in Expendables because that's what Sly loves, as does Jason. But that structure and how you design that, how much
Yeah.
directorial choreographing and plotting does that take?
Yeah, that's a lot when when you're developing the script. Because I came on and we were in development for about 4 months. I was working with the writers, and then and then throughout pre-production, you're sort of refining it. But for me, it's like you want to. Obviously it's the way the films are structured, but you want to sort of build and build and build and be building towards a big climax. And then it's about you want to find a difference in the texture and tone of each of the action sequences. And so, if you want to have a pop of a car chase, then you want to sort of flip it out and have a fist fight and then have a sort of a running, I like to call it a chase scene. So we can call... we had this in Hitman's Bodyguard where we had a big fight through a hardware store, and everyone was referring to it as the fight sequence, and Ryan and I were like, no, this is the chase sequence. This is literally Ryan just trying to run away from everyone. And I think it's that sort of reflected in Teddy in this film, because he should not, Kevin Hart should not be in this movie. And he's just literally just trying to stay alive. He doesn't want to be in this scenario. He's not a big tough guy that's going to stand and fight. So there's always inherent comedy in that situation. It's the fish out of water, and I think that was the fun in the hook that really sort of drew me to the project.
Kevin Hart is any of us who would be in a situation like this. What mistaken identity, you show up thinking you got one thing, and then all of a sudden you go down to the basement thinking you got a game room down there, and that's not what you find. And then it's, what do you do? And you're looking to anybody, even a captive person. It's like, hey, man, what's going on here? Go with me. I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know. And it's hilarious because you see yourself in the way you bring this to life. We see ourselves.
There's two, there's a duality to Kevin's performance, because he's putting on a performance for all these tough guys so that they think that he's tough. But then when they're not looking, he's showing an absolute terror. And I think that, to me, was that was really what I really honed in on the first time I spoke to Kevin. I was like, I think that, to me, is where the comedy is. And it's finding that duality in the performance. And then also finding in the choreographing and the shot execution, how do we have those private moments with Kevin and the audience where the bad guys aren't aware, but we're all aware of what the hell's going on. And I think that really is, like that fish out of water type scenario. I mean, I said from the outset that, I wanted to treat this like we're making a straight action thriller. It involves the FBI and a Homeland Security threat. And you can legitimately see that as a movie. And it's just, Kevin Hart has walked on the wrong film set. He should not be in this movie whatsoever. And I think it's that simple, And I think the more you sort of play into that, that's where the fun and games are.
Well, and this is where you and your DP, Rob Hardy, this is where the two of you really excel. Because you mentioned something very key. The audience it's presented in such a fashion where, okay, Kevin's character, Teddy, is talking to those who are also, quote unquote, perhaps victims or at the mercy of somebody else. But we're in on it. But the bad guys are not in on it. But you and Rob, with your camera angles, your placement, your focal length, you never break the fourth wall. So he's not talking to us.
Exactly. And there's quite a few, there's a lot of moments in the film, but there was one sequence in particular that Rob and I were working on, and we were like, well, if he drops the knives here, then we can go under the table with him picking them up, and this could be a moment where Kevin's absolutely freaking out, and then you can have a private moment with Kevin in the audience, and it's the same where you will have a shot, you have him at the head of a room, but it's like if he turns away from everybody in that room, bang, we get to see him in his private moment. And it was just a lot of fun sort of choreographing, because you're working with the choreographing of the actors as well as the shot construction and finding that interplay.
How difficult was the shot construction that you and Rob worked out here? Because I got to tell you, I love that you keep everything. You tend to keep things wider, mid shots, very, very, very few close-ups. And when you have a close-up, it's on the knives or a knife, or it's not on people. You're not isolating people. And I found that really interesting. So I'm curious about you and Rob and how you managed to choreograph the shots, the shot list or storyboard.
Well, Rob's a phenomenal talent, and he's worked on some monster productions and certainly up in that big action genre as well. And he's such a lovely guy, and we really hit it off. And that was, we just had a lot of fun putting this film together. And you're right, we do sort of lean towards the wider coverage because just maintaining that scale and scope. There's one thing that happens with the sort of comedy genre is things start to feel a bit small, whereas I still want to have that big cinematic experience, so to speak, that viewer experience, and then balance that with the comedy. And also, I think, letting the interplay of the actors to see that on screen. I think and again, this sort of all comes down to like rehearsing with the actors and blocking everything out, and then feeling confident that we can put it all together and keep those wides. But it's certainly, like one of the biggest headaches as a director is just when you've got multiple people in a room, and there's sort of that's where you start to lose sleep because you end up with a lot of different eye lines you've got to work out and cover off, and that's certainly where a lot of collaboration between Rob and myself, and we had a wonderful crew in Canada, and working with the camera operators too to sort of break those things down, because I've had scenarios where I remember on the first Hitman Bodyguard we had a courtroom sequence, and we worked it out. There was 27 eye lines, and it was just a nightmare. But you work through it, and you got to do your homework before you get there on the day and have it all sort of structured, so you're not, because it does take a lot of thinking time to work out. It almost becomes like a mathematical execution. There's a lot of bird's eye view floor plans that you're looking at.
And I think a perfect example is that third act meeting in the hotel room. You got, because that's multi-layer. You've got, sitting on the couch, you've got, the room has a step up by the windows, and everybody is on different levels.
Yes, I know. And then you've got characters entering the room later.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and that's a totally different level.
I would say, you're right, because that was actually that was the hard. I think we were there for 3 or 4 days on that set, and for whatever reason it was night shoot, so, because you don't want to bounce between day and night constantly. Once you move into nights, you're better off staying on nights, and that was a really, it was a lot of hard work, but also tremendously funny. So it, was very, very blessed with the crew, the cast and crew we had on this, because we were shooting during lockdown, and it was a really difficult. Everyone was in a bubble, but having that cast and crew just made it a joyful experience.
Well, you mentioned something really important about sticking more with the mids and wide shots so you can capture the interplay of the characters. How did Woody Harrelson make it through a scene without busting his gut in laughter playing opposite Kevin? My God, Patrick!
He was cracking up in every scene. Here's the secret. There's one of the scenes I've actually stitched his performance. I had to roto it because he was cracking up. So I shifted his performance so it looks like he's standing there stoic, but in reality he's broken by that and he was cracking up. I'm the biggest culprit of that as well. I've had scenarios where I've been forced out of the actual set, and they end up putting my monitor outside the studio doors because I'm laughing too much. So I'm sort of like the kid at school that's been sent into the corner of the classroom by himself. It's a lot of fun. I mean, there was one scene in particular we had a lot of trouble shooting, and I know Rob Hardy, the DP, was cracking up. I was cracking up. Woody was cracking up. Kevin was cracking up. And it took us like 15 takes before we even got one take where no one cracked up. That was on an aeroplane when they first meet. So, it is a challenge.
My God. I would be remiss not to ask you about the editing. Craig Alpert's editing here. He's so good at comedy. He's so good at action. How long were you and Craig working on the editing here to find those emotional beats and those comedy beats, especially when the comedy is within the action beats?
Yeah, look, that is the challenge, and Craig's a wonderful guy, and we were working remotely with our editorial systems, because you can do that now. You can have edit systems of different parts of the world, and you can be working throughout and having that dialogue and that exchange, and everything's sort of online now. But that is the challenge, because sometimes we've got a scene and there's so many gags in there and it's so funny, but then you're like, well, that works as an isolated scene. If I played that as a highlight clip, people would go, oh, that's hilarious. But then you do have to step back, and I think that's where the craft comes into play. So you have the ability to step back, and now you've got to look at the film as a whole, and you say, well, that's pushing things too far, and that's certainly where you come down to testing it with audiences, because you want to know sort of the ebbs and flows, because it really is a balancing act between the action and the comedy, and maintaining the stakes and having that threat, but also that lightness and to the tone where required. So it really is, that's where all the editing work comes into play.
I have one last question for you, Patrick, because I know they have a packed day for you here. I'm really curious, as accomplished as you are as a director and as adept as you are at navigating action, comedy, tension, and emotionality, was there anything here, or what was the most challenging aspect of The Man from Toronto? Because you do have so many more added elements here. It's almost like a culmination of what you had in Red Hill, what you brought from Expendables 3 with 10 trillion characters, and then the two Hitmans. But it seems like everything is meshed here. So I'm curious what you may have learned, or what was the greatest challenge to bring this to fruition.
It's like putting it on an old coat when you go back on set. You feel comfortable in it, and I think I guess probably the most challenging aspect was just the schedule on this film, just because of the COVID protocol. And we were really fortunate to be working, and that's something I'll be forever grateful, is that I was actually working during lockdown, and it was a really difficult shoot because no one could see their family or kids or loved ones or friends. We couldn't have visitors, and everyone had to sit by themselves on the weekend, and it was a really tough process, but I'm very, very grateful that the film came out the way it did. I think then probably, I've got to be honest, the most challenging aspect was the snow. Just dealing with a film that's not set in snow, and you're shooting in the dead of winter in Toronto, and having to stop mid-action sequence, and everyone's like, why are we cutting? And you're like, because it's snowing. It's snowing, guys. There is literally, I remember we were shooting this heartfelt speech from Woody and Kevin, and I've got these beautiful shots lined up, and where they're giving it, it's one of those heart, there's some key themes in the film, and it always comes down to the heart soul for me. And I had to call cut mid-performance and with Woody in it, and it was such a wonderful performance too. And I was like, dude, there's snow falling on your shoulders while you're talking. I can't use it.
Oh my God! Well, another job so well done, Patrick. I will definitely be watching this multiple times, because it's the kind of movie that I'll put on at 2:00 in the morning and laugh.
Right. Good.
And
that's all we wanted. We just wanted to make the world laugh. I think the world could use a laugh, so here it is.
Well,
delivered.
You certainly succeeded. I can't wait for the next one.
Oh, me too.
Patrick, thank you so much, and hopefully we'll get to chat again sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Patrick. Bye-bye.